And now I'm going to talk a little bit about putting together a graphical user interface app. Okay, so if I wanted to go back and create a temperature converter app, this is how I would put it together as far as interface goes. And this is done by hand, not by ChatGPT. So I did put in the work here to actually create this, but we've got of course, the dual import statements, the second one being the one that imports the modern themed versions of TK interface. So TTK is what I'm going to use when I instantiate all of my widgets, because those are the more modern looking ones as far as look and behavior goes. So I'm creating a window. I'm giving that window a title of temperature converter, window geometry once again, with the wacky string here instead of numbers, but we're just going to play along because we don't have a choice. And then window.column configure, window.row configure. These are here so that when I resize the window, or when I want something to fill up the entire window, regardless of the window size, it will make sure that happens. So that's what column configure and row configure. Basically, I'm saying this row and this column, or this column and this row, weight number one gives it the highest priority, which means fill up as much space as you can with this in the window. And then I'm creating a frame, TTK frame, giving a parent of window. And you'll see that I'm not saying master equals on these. I'm just giving first argument is always the parent. Saves me a few keystrokes. So I've got mainframe, column configure, and for both columns, weight of one. And what that does is make sure that there's two columns and they fill up that whole available space. So column index 1, index 0, and index 1, the left column and the right column equal importance. If I have one over the other, then they may not be the same size, depending on what's in them. So I've got two columns, and then I've created a couple of string variables. One is the conversion type that I'm making, because I want to make an app where I can choose to convert either from Fahrenheit to Celsius or Celsius to Fahrenheit. So I've got the conversion type, and then the value is going to be the number that people type in. Now, why is it a string? Because whenever somebody types anything into any entry box, it's a string, just like we went through with index or input. So it starts out as a string. So I want to treat it that way. So we've got a radio button, or a pair of radio buttons, one for Celsius, one Fahrenheit. And I'm going to say Celsius to Fahrenheit and Fahrenheit to Celsius as the label. And this, the variable that it's tied to, is going to be the conversion type. So I'm going to give people a radio button choice to choose what type of conversion to do. And then below that, I'm going to have the entry box where they enter the number, a button that says calculate, and a label here to display the result. So those are the pieces, and this is where I'm putting them all together. So I'm putting the mainframe in, the radio buttons in columns. So I'm using these columns to put the radio buttons next to each other. And then below that, the entry, the calculating button, and the result. And you can see I put sticky west and east on here. So it's sticky on the left and right sides. That's where we use the cardinal directions, west and east. And I'm providing some padding. Pad Y is the vertical spacing in between things, and pad X is the horizontal spacing around things. And you can see those three elements are spanning both columns. So the place I'm really using the columns is to put these two radio buttons next to each other. Everything below that spans both columns. And that's what I have so far in the program. Let's run this. Take a look. Okay, so here's my temperature converter. I've got Celsius to Fahrenheit, Fahrenheit to Celsius, the entry box, a button that says calculate, and the label for the result. It is a program with no functionality right now. Okay, so that's what I've developed so far. That's the starting place. And I recommend that it's a good idea to create or prototype at least your graphical user interface before you add the functionality. And if we're really starting from scratch, what I'd recommend is starting out with a pencil and paper and draw what you want and figure out, think through what are the columns, what are the rows, how do you want it to lay out. I mean, you can always do everything in a vertical stack, but that's not a great user interface, right? So you want to think about how you want that layout to look and how it plays out in columns and rows. And once you draw something, maybe the next step is to describe it to ChatGPT and see how close it can get to your drawing. You could even take a picture of your drawing and upload that and say, I want this interface. Here's what I'm doing. I want this interface in TK interface. You know, specify the things that you want using grid rather than pack to put the things in place. And you know, if you use the right terminology, I bet you can get pretty close with the tools that are available. And then once you have a prototype, not that this is going to be your final version, because once you start adding functionality, you might realize that it doesn't work the way you thought. But let's say I also have this. It is a function called convert temperature. Now let's say that's left over from another application, and I want to use this. Okay, so convert temperature takes a target scale and a value. The target scale, of course, is a string, whether C or F, capitals, and it will use that to determine the formula and the value to return. So it takes in a number and it takes in a target scale. Now, the interesting thing here is that it is assuming that value is a number. So just looking at this, I'm like, this makes me a little nervous because this is assuming something, but we can address that elsewhere. This will convert to upper, so even a lowercase is fine, but that doesn't really matter because in my mind, I'm thinking I'm controlling that with radio buttons. I don't have to worry about somebody entering the wrong letter or anything like that. And I want to show you something, a method here. You can see this part of the function is something new for us. And this is a way of documenting your functions so that the documentation is easily accessible, even if somebody doesn't have access to this file. So if I want to, let's say I have this function here inside a file called temp functions in my main directory. So if I say import, not that, artificial intelligence is only somewhat helpful, as TF. Hi, can I help you? Not in this building, not in this classroom. This is a different class. No problem. So import temp functions as TF. Okay, I'm sure you remember the directory function. So I can find out TF. So if I want to print that out, I can get all of these pieces and the function name that's in there, convert temp. But there's something else that I can do here. If I do this, if I print tf.convertTemp .dir, not dir, sorry, doc, the documentation, if I print out that special string, then I can get a printout of that documentation. That's what was in that special string. So if you're writing a function and you want to share it with the world, that's a good thing to include. Also, if you're using somebody else's function and you want to know how it works, you can try printing out that documentation and see if it's there. If they are a user who kind of knows what they're doing, they will have included that documentation in their function. And you can see here, it tells you, right? It tells you what are the arguments. It wants a string and a float, and it wants either C or F for the string, and the float is the input temperature, assumed to be in the opposite scale. So it tells you everything you want to know, and it returns a float that represents the converted temperature. Cool. So that's great. So now that I know what I need from that, I can just use this, right? So if I want to make this a little simpler, I'll just import this into my main namespace from temp functions, import all. So now instead of saying tf dot whatever, I can just say convert temp. Now it's a native function in my program, which is great. And so what I would need to do is say command convert temp, right? But there's a problem. There's a problem here because convert temp requires 2 arguments. And so I've got a small problem because first of all, it's a function that I'm getting from somewhere else. So I don't necessarily, now we know I could go into that other file and just modify that function if I wanted to. But that's kind of not the best way to do it. And so if I can't do that, or it's not ideal for me to do that, then what I would need to do is create what's called a wrapper function.